And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It's a new month. Only 2 months left in 2025. Holy cow, what happened to October? Hope everyone had a good spooky season, a good Halloween. It landed on a Friday, so that gave people a reason to party 2 days in a row because, a Friday and a Saturday. So there you go. So hope everybody had a fun time. And yeah, new month means a new theme, and it's rockin' world. So we're looking at, I know we did musicals in January, but those are musicals. We're looking at rock musicals this time. These are all going to be musicals this month that involve either a single band or rock music specifically, like hair rock and that. So we got some interesting choices that I hope you'll enjoy this month, and we're kicking it off with I could say this is a cult classic, actually. Pink Floyd's The Wall. And it's a small crew tonight. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up a chair, and popping your favorite drink with us as we talk movie spoilers. And tonight with me is just my right-hand man, but it's not just right. It's not just the man. He is Mr. Ian Simmons. How you doing, Ian?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this movie. A movie that I'm not excited about. So figure that one out.
I figured when I was watching it, I'm like, yeah, this is going to be an interesting discussion with Ian. So no offense at all.
Nah, you know me. It's fine.
We've been doing this long enough now to where I kind of get a little gauge. You surprise me once in a while. I got a little gauge when I'm watching the film going, yeah, it's going to be an interesting conversation. But yes, Pink Floyd's The Wall. Thank you for joining me, Ian, to talk about this interesting, cult classic. Because when it came out, it didn't do too well in the theaters, but it outside of Pink Floyd fans, but it gained legs, and it's still looked at today, and it's being looked at by us. So Ian, since you did probably quite care for the film, from what sounds like, you showed your hand a little. You don't have to do the synopsis. I can do the synopsis, but if you would like to try to do the synopsis, you're welcome to.
Late 70s, early 80s era rock superstar Pink, played by Brian Geldof. He is suffering a mental breakdown, possibly due to childhood trauma involving his father, who died during World War II. And a strange relationship with his mother, a very strained relationship with his girlfriend/wife, who leaves him because he's having a nervous breakdown, and he either imagines or remembers that she had an affair. He goes nuts, shaves his eyebrows. There's a lot of cartoons, something about fascism, and then it's over. So yeah, that's Pink Floyd The Wall. Welcome to Rock and Roll World Month. We'll catch you next week for no, sorry.
Well, so this was my first time viewing it. I know I've seen clips, I've seen pieces of the film. I never actually sat down and watched the whole film from start to finish. I've only seen the clips and mostly the video of The Wall. And so going into it, and I never really looked into it too much. I mean, I like Pink Floyd, don't get me wrong. I enjoy their music quite a bit. But for me, it was like I just never dug into it. I knew of it. I knew the how it worked its way into pop culture and that, but mostly just the song, The Wall. So, but the way some people talked about this film, I went into it thinking it was going to be different than what it was, but it was different in a good way for me. I was actually happy because when I got what was actually going on, I'm like, it is interesting how this has evolved from this to what people deem as significant and symbolism and such in the film. When you realize this is just about a rocker who's gone too far in popularity, over the edge, and just had a psychotic break. And I didn't realize that's what the film was actually about at first, going into it. I had thought about, we're, the fascist imagery and all this. Oh, it's going to be making statements about politics and all. No, this is all internalized shit that this guy is dealing with.
Well, sort of, because you've got the reality of the movie, and then you've also got the
True.
fact that the
Mhm,
filmmakers, Roger
mhm.
Waters decided to take this approach with the story he was telling.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
yes, all that messaging is in there, and it's also the representative of the mental breakdown that this rock star is having.
Right.
So, yeah, the story the truth is it's both.
Mhm.
What weight you want to put on either way, either direction, how it falls, that's kind of subjective, but it's all in there. And I think that's kind of part of the problem.
Mm.
um, is this is sort of my first time watching it too.
Mhm.
Tried watching The Wall probably a dozen times in my life, and I have always fallen asleep.
Wow.
It's one of my father's favorite movies, when he was alive. He would always
Sure.
talk about The Wall and try and get me to watch it, and we would watch it. I love the art and the iconography, by
Mhm.
Gerald Scarfe, who's kinda like a demented version of Ralph Steadman, which sounds funny to say. But it was kinda like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which up
Mhm.
until this year, I'd never made it all the way through either.
Right.
Um, but I would always, it got to a point where it's just repetitive,
Mhm.
and I watched it start to finish today, and I'm convinced that you can just watch the first half hour of The Wall and then turn it off, because it gets very repetitive, including, glimpses of the kind of fascist iconography
Mhm.
that happened in that first half hour. You get long drawn out versions of that at the end. And like, yeah, but none of this is really interesting. And I've heard, some of the criticism of this movie, which I agree with, it's self-indulgent, and it's like, oh, the poor millionaire rock star is having a nervous breakdown, and he thinks that his influence over people is sort of like, the mid-century Germans, and people are sheep and all that stuff, and everyone's going to the meat grinder because of authoritarianism or whatever. It's like, yeah, that's fine, but what else you got? And the answer is not much. So it's like just over 90 minutes long, and I'm convinced the first 30 is where it's at, especially in terms of the animation and things. And then you're good. You're not gonna, no one's gonna quiz you on the last 2/3 of The Wall and fail you if you've only watched the first, because you can answer all the questions.
Wow. Well, there you go, folks. We're done. The shortest spoiler room ever. I would argue that since it is about his descent of his breakdown, that I didn't mind the longer sections. And while it may have been a bit repetitive, we get the pieces of his life in flashback and how things come together. And I always like films that tell you like that. Does it get repetitive in some of the shots you see going, okay, where's the rest of that shot? We've showed that a few times. What's after that? And you eventually get there. It takes some time, longer than some people care to. But for me, I didn't mind. I liked the imagery in here. My wife, who sat down and watched some of it with me, she left, came back, and watched the rest, and then she was looking it up. And what Pink Floyd has said that this is actually about, basically telling of their experiences as performers and such, and in you know and some of the things that actually happened to them, which I thought was interesting. For instance, one of the songs that I really love from this soundtrack is "Comfortably Numb,"
Hmm.
and that whole sequence actually is Waters' retelling of what actually happened to him when he was supposed to perform. He was like severely sick, and they injected him with like adrenaline or something to force him to go on stage and perform because they had a huge crowd out there. So, it is a bit of an amalgamation of some real world tales worked into this surrealism that they provide. And, one of the things I appreciate quite a bit is that the majority of the story is told from music. I mean, you get very little like actual dialogue talking in here. It's imagery and music. And if you're familiar with Pink Floyd's music, you realize, oh, that kind of fits. That fits. If they're gonna make a movie, that kind of fits, because their albums tell stories. Dark Side of the Moon as well. The old Wizard of Oz, connect Wizard of Oz to Dark Side of the Moon, which works for the most part. So for me, I guess I enjoyed it a lot. But again, those who've been following this podcast know how much of a visual guy I am. And I'm going to say some of the cinematography in here is crazy. I did not expect, especially that opening shot down the hallway that we get. I loved that shot. I'm like looking at it going, oh, we're doing this. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's sort of my issue with it is this quote unquote story, and those elements become so repetitive that it almost doesn't matter that it looks great and they're doing interesting things with the visuals, because I've said this before, like I get visuals and sometimes they're really impressive, but for me, it's pretty much all about the story, because I can go to a museum and look at an amazing painting, but I'm not going to stand there and stare at it for 90 minutes. I can get something out of it. Yeah. And I don't understand what those people are doing. Like, are you that slow? Okay. Because 90 minutes is a long time to look at something. Okay.
It can be, yeah.
Especially if you're talking about one single still image. Now, if you're looking at it from a purely technical, artistic standpoint, then sure, you can get a lot out of doing that as far as like research and trying to learn technique and what the artist was thinking. That's one thing. But if you're trying to like gain some like grander meaning from it, I mean, that's honestly what books are for. Okay. If you are attuned, you can look at a great work of art and get a lot out of it in far, far less time. That's why when I watch a movie, if it's got a visual artistic statement to make, and it makes that, and then can continue to impress me, and this is subjective, I understand, but to reinforce its genius throughout the rest of the film and be supported by a strong screenplay, that's where the sweet spot is. If it's all just, it's kind of like James Cameron's Avatar. That movie is like 2.5 hours long, and people are like, but wasn't it amazing? Like, no, because you get everything it has to offer visually within the first 20 minutes.
Sure.
And then it's just a terrible story and poor acting. And then James Cameron's going to spend the next 30 years making 5 terrible movies. I'm not down with that. And I had the same kind of experience with The Wall. It's like, yeah, I get it. And especially because they keep coming back to it. And like, yeah, they expand the scenes that you get glimpses of, but those scenes don't ultimately amount to anything except longer versions of, yeah, he's still swimming in a pool, except now he's bleeding. And then we see a little bit more bleeding. And look, he's back in the pool again. Like, I get it, man. You're depressed. It's cool. It's okay. Go talk to someone. Hey, Bob Hoskins is in it. I remember him from Roger Rabbit, which is a few years away, and then Jenny Wright from Near Dark. That's great.
And then Little Nell as well, which as your Rocky Horror connection, as she was in here as one of the groupies from the groupie scene in here, actually. So
I'll take your word for it.
No, and I guess for me, I got something different. Once I realized too, going into it, that the social commentary and such that a lot of people pull from this, more so than it being the inner turmoil of an individual. I find fascinating how people pulled that out of the film. And while it may have been making a statement, I guess it hit for me differently with some of the footage. Like, Brick in the Wall now means something different to me when I see the entire video and in its context. Then, because I know it was about education, but at the same time, I'm like, but this is being told from the rock star's perspective. So it is how he could be seeing education, whether or not other folks share that vision or not, you don't know. It's just his perception, just like a few other things in here. especially when we get into the fascist situation of him. It's him taking the fascist situation angle because he's trying to take control of. He's gone so far over the edge internally that's how he tries to get internal control. And he's so fed up with everything, he goes to the opposite extreme. He went to the one extreme of complete, loose living, layover, just to, okay, this is how I've got to do in order to come back from this. And neither one is a viable option for him in the end. But
I think that's part of what bugs me about this story is it's such a teenage point of view on the world. And maybe it's a greater statement about the emotional and cognitive developmental arrestedness of rock stars. They're kind of perpetual spoiled children. But it's like, yeah, man, you've got money and fame, but as long as you're not in debt to the record label, just quit. Are you addicted? Are you addicted to fame? Because this guy is so despondent throughout the entire movie. There is literally, it feels like a 45-hour sequence of Jenny Wright like going into his hotel suite and like watching him like sit in a chair watching television until finally he snaps and then goes on to like an 8-hour tirade of like smashing his hotel room. It's like, all right, where's the middle ground? Like, what am I watching here? This is boring. If you talk about like there's very little dialogue in this movie, yeah, I agree, and that's sort of a problem because I don't understand why I should care about this person. Like he's got a sad childhood, and his father was, I guess, suicidal before he got blown up in the war, which is kind of an interesting thing. But it throws all these ideas out here, but it's just in the context of like a rock music video. Like a really long rock music video. And that's not character. That's not moving a story forward. It's left for me to interpret. And my interpretation is all these people are awful and I don't care about their problems because they have the solutions to all their problems right in their hands and they don't care enough to do anything about it. So why do I care enough to watch? And the answer is for decades I didn't. And now that I have watched the entire thing, I was better off falling asleep.
Jesus. And see, for me, I think it's an interesting exploration because there's bits and pieces in here that some people that I know would probably find very relatable. And while it might not be the full film, just seeing that angle, seeing someone approach that material and put it on the screen visually may be enough for some folks to either relate or change their idea or realize, oh, I'm not the only one, or yes, that's exactly how I've felt sometimes, and help them deal with either those issues or whatnot. I mean, people, it's art. So, I mean, this is an art piece. I mean, this isn't, this is artists expressing themselves visually while normally they only express themselves through music. And it's not everyone's bag, but I found it very interesting to see some of the visuals they came up with and the connection of the young boy inside him versus him being older. And when his wife, pardon my phrase, but when his wife comes home and she is looking to have some intimate relations with her husband, and he turns to the TV, I'm like, okay, there's something really wrong with this dude.
Right, and but you're hitting on something, Mark. There's this isn't a story. It's all just visuals and not even ideas, but just kind of concepts, right? He's thinking back on his childhood, but where's the transition? I don't know how he became a rock star, why he became a rock star. There's whole chunks of his life that are missing. They're left up to us to, wonder about and maybe interpret, but not really, because then it's all just like, oh, look, the airplane is transforming into a bird and then back again. And look, it's fascism or something and riots. That means something. What are they fighting over? I don't know. It looks cool. The whole thing with the wife leaving him, and that's, again, that gets back to repetitiveness, because he's just, as with the groupie that we would see later on, he's just sitting there watching television while there's all this, sex and cool stuff happening around him. As far as, this meaning something to people, it's relatable only in that I think we've all been there. Some of us, perhaps more than others, of like not liking where we are and wishing things were better, and also sometimes wondering if there's something better on the other side. But this movie doesn't deal with it. It just depicts it in its
Mhm.
worst kind of most overindulgent, grotesque self. There's no resolution to it. The movie just kind of ends. And at the end of it, you're like, "Well, okay, what does that mean? How is that supposed to help anybody except to say, yeah, I've been there too, man. And the solution is dot, dot, dot."
Well, I mean, for many people, it just at least starting the path of changing things is finding something relatable or realize that they're not the only ones out there who have felt that. I mean, in this one, it is implied, the way I pulled it from is that he didn't get quite the attention he was looking for from his family, his mom, who handled things quite peculiarly, not only with him, but with the death of his father. And then his schooling, he wanted to be an artist. He had dreams, but he felt that school, at least all the teachers and such he had, which is what another brick in the wall, were restricting his creativeness, were actually against it, were don't be a free thinker. Um which
Right.
there are some
Again,
schools like that, but
well,
uh,
yeah, but they don't depict that in the movie. What they depict is he's in class writing poetry when he's supposed to be paying attention in class, and the teacher comes up and he takes the thing and he does what teachers have done in sitcoms and movies for time immemorial. They read it in front of the class, slap him with a ruler, and he's embarrassed and he starts to cry. That's not depicting, oh, the school is, doesn't want him to be an artist. Okay, he can be an artist on his own time. I know he's only like 11 years old, but he has to understand that he's doing something he's not supposed to do. And if he gets caught, is this the first time this ever happened to him or someone else in the class? I mean, the part of art is rebellion. I
sure,
understand the
but
art comes out of pain, but the whole like wall thing and oh, that one incident means that the entire school system is corrupt and we're all just being turned to a meat grinder, man. And he's got this image of the headmaster at home being like cucked by his wife and him being slapped around and all this stuff. Like, it's just so juvenile, and it rises to like this juvenile level of politics, almost like assuming that everything that is restrictive and conservative is just not helpful and stodgy and dumb and serves no purpose. But the thing is, everything that he's doing in his life from that point on, indulging in like drugs and sex and lapsing into psychosis and watching television, all that's kind of doing is underscoring the fact that he doesn't have any discipline or structure or meaning in his life because he spent it rebelling and not doing what he's supposed to do.
well,
So,
but on the other angle, you can look at it that it was too extreme of construction. It was too constrictive, too conforming, which we do have out there, and that ended up pushing him to the rebellion rather than finding a middle ground with him.
but that's the problem. That's the only thing that the filmmaker is presenting to us. That one incident in that school. There's no the interaction with other classmates. This is part of the reason that
He didn't,
it's
but he
tough.
no one.
It's tough drawing a story or meaning out of a music video, and that's what this is. It presents one incident out of this whole thing and says, see. I'm like, no, I don't see. You haven't shown me anything except one bad thing that happened to one kid. How did the other kids feel about it? Was he really bullied? There's a weird incident in a park where he ascribes like he wants to pretend like this other stranger person is his father. That was kind of interesting, but none of these things go anywhere.
And I guess for me, I take it what is presented, and I take it internally to where it may be meaning or go anywhere with it. I mean, with the conservative part, it even though he has it happen once, especially with the song in that implied and the visuals included, you get the impression that at least from his perspective, it's happening all the time. Now, whether or not it is actually happening all the time, we can't say in the real world because the whole movie is told from his perspective. But I would say that it is implied this is not the first time with his book.
But
And
where? But here's a question: where is that implied?
just from his reaction of coming up with the brick in the wall song and the words that go along with it.
But
Um,
but again, you're talking about the perspective of an 11-year-old boy, okay?
right. It's
It's in
exploring
it's
the
in
perspective of an 11-year-old boy, which I find interesting. I found
okay,
it.
but that idea,
Mhm.
that incident happens to that 11-year-old kid, and he comes up with his entire fantasy of,
Sure.
"Okay, now we're all bricks in the wall," which
Mm,
is a bit of an elevated concept for an 11-year-old kid to come up with based on that one incident. So you're right, there might have been other incidents, but we need to see that to get a foundation of that, and also to figure out why this lightning bolt image or incident
mm,
stuck with him and colored his entire worldview up until he was a rock star in his, like, late 20s, mid 30s. It's just, again, it's not realistic, it's juvenile. It is, much like the bird training changing into an airplane, a cartoon.
mm.
And that's fine if you wanna present that. The Wall music video has some kind of interesting ideas behind it, but when for the 5-minute, clip that became the MTV music video
Right.
sensation and all
Mm.
that other stuff, that's a great concept, and you can kind of argue about the social ramifications of it. But when you kind of peel back that layer and say, "Okay, so what's this really about?" It's like, "Oh, it was an incident that happened when I was a kid, and now I think that, basically I painted my entire worldview because I got slapped by a ruler once because I was doing something in
Well,
class that I didn't like
see
getting caught."
seeing what the school is and the way the kid is, I guess I put together that that wasn't the first incident that happened with it. The way the teachers are portrayed, and again, the way the song is, and also the brick in the wall may not necessarily be just the kid's perception, though. The way it's edited, it is idea that he has come up with it, but it could also be the rock star, older rock star, remembering the kid and his imagery of the incident. But I think you don't necessarily need to see, at least for me, I did not need to see um it more than once of this incident happening, because the impression I get was that this happens more than once. I've had that happen to myself, to where it was more than once, even though I included that one incident. It's happened more than once, but I don't. I think
Well, but
they're
but
trying to.
but Mark, I understand that you're bringing your own perspective into it, but I'm talking about what the movie presents to us. And this
Right.
is the first time you've watched The Wall in its
Hmm.
entirety, but you're familiar with the iconography and the music
Hmm.
video and the imagery going back, all these decades.
Sure.
So how much of that and that social interpretation that is
Mhm.
impossible to avoid, because this is an iconic landmark movie, music video, and idea,
Sure.
did you bring into the movie versus watching the film, seeing what it has to say and how it's presenting it, and coming away with that conclusion?
I didn't bring away the popularity or what has been said with this film, mostly because, again, I didn't know a whole lot of it outside of the brick in the wall. I
Yeah.
just
I mean, that's
the
that's what
song
we're talking
itself,
about.
right? Yeah, the song itself. But for me, in the context of the movie, especially seeing it within the context of the movie, it pulled in more relatable from personal experiences than that, than not outside influences, not what the society has said, not what people have analyzed it to say, not what other discussions like the ones we're having here have said. It just struck me as personal. I shut out the rest of the stuff, and maybe subconsciously it enhanced it a little. But for me personally, I went into the film and just shut out, okay, what is this actually about versus what we've heard? And so I kind of just sat and focused myself on the movie. Um, I didn't have the my phone or anything. I just watched it,
No,
from
I'm not
start
I'm
to
not saying
finish.
that you're
And
looking and scrolling stuff up while it's going. I'm just saying that I don't understand what you're getting out of this based on the context of what's in the movie. You've said yourself that you've been in environments and situations where you have experienced, multiple instances of strict teachers or institutions or
mhm,
whatever. That's fine. But in terms of what the movie is presenting, where is the evidence that this is a systemic repeated problem versus one incident that kind of colored his entire worldview that somehow stuck with him for decades, and nothing interfered to have him look back and say, well, yeah, maybe he was trying to teach me something in a way that was, unproductive, going back to our cuckoo's nest conversation, or maybe I was just embarrassed and I projected that onto something. I blew that way out of proportion. And, maybe we're not all, bound for the meat grinder. Or if we are, how does that tie into these World War II visions I'm having of my father? There's a way to tie this all together and have it mean something and be coherent, but you can't tell that in the context of an hour and a half long rock video where the visuals are paramount and the story is just kind of not even a story. Again, it's a nebulous sort of concept.
And maybe it's because I have a nebulous brain. I'm not sure that I pulled from it. It's not so, because, and I get it, but seeing the context of the fascist aspect of it that we get in here, that imagery, part of it's pulled in from the World War II of his experiences, his dad being killed in World War II, and equating control to the fascism and such. That setup at least made more sense now that I've seen it in context. I'm like, okay, that's where he's pulling that from. And seeing him go to the opposite end, to where he basically is a leader of fascists and shutting down anybody who is different from being, what he considers a standard, normal, where that came from. Did that possibly come from his teachings? You're right. It's not fully outlined in the school that it happened more than once. But again, I think they leave that for you to imply that it is, given his situation, that it wasn't just the one incident that led to his breaking down and then going to the other extreme, and him seeing fascism as control, extreme control. I think it's the struggle that he has in here, trying to piece what he went through as a child and what he experienced. And you're right. They could put either repeat incidences in here of him getting disciplined, over disciplined, which again, I think him getting his hand slapped for having a poetry book is extreme. It's not needed. I've seen that type of teacher and it didn't help anybody. I watched a algebra teacher. No, geometry teacher. It's geometry. Wait, no, algebra 2. It was algebra 2. Algebra 2. And one of the kids made the mistake of going to the teacher and going, what exactly, how is this going to relate to the real world? And the teacher went off to where he screamed at her for a good 3 minutes, picked books off of his shelf and slammed them on her desk in front of her in such an extreme way that I was like, dude, it's math, man. I'm like sitting here going, do you, and that's the thing. So that's what I mean is I've seen the extreme reactions of teachers and how that can affect the students, even from one incident. But
right. But here's the thing, that what you just described is extreme and it's uncalled for, but it's not what we're talking about with this movie. A teacher slapping a student with a ruler, we look back on it as barbaric, but at one point that was just the education system. And these kids knew that. That was discipline. Going back to the days of paddle boards and, staying behind and writing stuff on chalkboards for 3 hours, like Bart Simpson did at the beginning
Sure.
of each episode, right? That was just the environment they were in. What you're describing is something that wouldn't be acceptable in any domain. But on top of that, it would have been really interesting to see a film tackle that dichotomy that this character is going through, where he worshiped the memory of his father, who was a military man,
right,
and who was not the kind of guy who would probably be sitting there writing poetry in the middle of class. You don't get to be a top officer in the British military fighting the Nazis by being a screw up. He was a man of discipline and honor. The war kind of drove him crazy, as we saw when he was, fetishizing those bullets earlier on in the movie. But, you're talking about someone who was disciplined to the nth degree in the fight against fascism. And then his son sees himself breaking all the rules and inevitably mentally going down a path where he saw himself as a fascist leader. Now, at least in his mind's eye,
Mhm.
there's really something to look at there and how he reconciled that. But the movie doesn't care enough to even draw those parallels really or discuss them. And it's kind of frustrating because I'm like, wow, there's a real movie here. And I
Mhm.
wish I could see it someday.
And perhaps we will see it later on. But no, I get what you're saying is taking what's on screen versus what your theater of the mind may put together from the bits and pieces giving to you on screen. Does that how's that speak to the film itself? Does some would argue that the film sparking your imagination or having you putting the pieces together yourself or bringing your own pieces into these situations is the effective art, where effective piece of movie art. And others, like as you've mentioned, you want more, you want the film to present more of the idea than leaving it too much up to the audience. I mean, I know we've talked before, you don't mind not having your hand held, but this is beyond not holding your hand. This is like giving you a few sentences and now write the book.
Well, it's more it's slightly different than that, but it's along that track. Is that I'm not convinced that Roger Waters or anybody involved in the making of this movie actually had a story to tell,
Mhm.
rather than just a bunch of cool ideas and sort of
Sure.
half concepts. And that's where I kind of draw the line. Is like if I have the sense that the filmmaker knows exactly what they want to say and how they want to say it, but they want to keep some things from me to make me do a little bit of the work, that's one thing. But if it's like, let's just throw all this against the wall, man, the audience will figure out what it means, man, because it's like art, man. I'm like, no, go screw yourself.
Though I'm going to say, back to the discipline part, while that may have been the standard, it doesn't mean it was exactly right on how they were handling discipline, as we know, especially
Right.
nowadays.
But what I'm saying is it
So
might, we're looking at it as shocking, right? It may very well not have been shocking to him. Perhaps this is the first time he had ever been slapped with the ruler, but
mhm.
are we to believe that he'd never seen that before?
Well, it doesn't mean that
Maybe
he didn't think it was right, though, or just normal. Just because you see it doesn't mean that you can't think beyond this, going, this isn't right.
it kind of does because he's 11. And when you grow up in an environment where that is the norm, then you don't know anything else. You don't have the discipline or the knowledge of looking 40 years ahead in the future and thinking, "My God, how barbaric." That's the waters you swim in, no pun intended. Um,
Well, it may be implying, though, that he was thinking beyond that already, and that he was ahead of his other thinkers, and he was thinking outside of the box
there's no
sometimes,
evidence for that whatsoever in
uh,
the movie.
of him not thinking outside of the box. How the animated imagery alone, with other people not coming up with that's him, thinking outside the box.
We don't know that. We're seeing that as the Pink, the rock star, thinking back on his childhood
Sure.
memory
Mhm.
and applying these visuals to that. Maybe that is all the imagination of this 11-year-old kid and he's a creative savant. Again, the movie does us no favors by just having this all kind of like thrown up against the wall
Mhm.
for us to look at and maybe interpret without having any kind of a coherent vision or anything really to say about it. That's the thing that bugs me. I would like to watch either of these movies that we're talking about, where it's this kid is a magical genius who can come up with all these great ideas and he carries that into adulthood or whatever, and maybe this was the inciting incident that scarred him. Maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back because he's been hit 100 times or he's seen his classmates, and that's what compels him to stand up and say, no, this institution is wrong and it's turning us all into these slaves and meat puppets for the big machinery and whatever. Or it's just a psychotic breakdown metaphor. Either one's interesting, but without some more support,
Mhm.
you might call it a screenplay beneath it. It's all just, pretty.
Well, and again, we're looking back on it from here when it was first made. It it may have, and this could be just because, again, as we've mentioned before with some of these older films too, looking at it now, and just what you said, what you see is shocking now, but considered the norm. Maybe that's why they don't outline everything here, is because some of the things presented towards their what they hope is their target audience has already witnessed those things regularly, and so they're already putting their real world experiences, because they have been through that, to where they've been through the school system where it was overly disciplined, and they've gone through the education system which has been teaching conformity. They're talking to an audience not necessarily modern or outside of even, say, British culture, because this is a very British show, but it's talking to a specific audience in here. And that could also be where it might be lost a bit of their assumption of who's actually watching this.
It's entirely possible. But again, I don't know because the movie doesn't help me out. It doesn't explain where it's even coming from. Because yeah, I mean, slapping a kid with the ruler, it does seem, harsh. But if you also want to put this in the context of he was growing up, let's call it in the because I can't remember, was he conceived before, I guess, before his dad went off to the war?
Yeah, he was conceived before his dad went off to the war, because you had that couple of shots where she was reading the newspaper and there was a bassinet there, and it
So,
was
but he never knew his dad. Is that what we're supposed to imply?
right.
Okay, so he would have been coming up in the probably the mid 1950s by the time he's in that school and that incident happens.
Right.
So you're looking, especially with Britain, which you talk about the bombing of Dresden, that country
Yeah.
was decimated by the Nazis. So what you have there is an extreme discipline culture coming out of that war. That never again attitude says, yeah, we need to raise a generation of disciplined men and women, but we're not going to, you can't have poets in the trenches necessarily. You talk like 15 years later, you've got the British invasion with the Beatles and pop and all that stuff. And basically the kind of the Western movements towards anti-war, anti-authoritarianism. But there is a point there kind of in between World War I and what we would call, Vietnam, and you had Korea and all that stuff in the middle there. But you had the lessons of that war is we need to be ready. And we need to have people ready in case something like this ever rears its ugly head again. So, yeah. And there are enough people who were kind of okay with that idea that maybe they accepted some harsher discipline than we would, look back on. I think things would be a bit different if we were called into the trenches today. Some of those things we see on the landscape of pop culture or TikTok, we'd be like, no one has time for any of this. We need to get serious and learn how to kill people.
Sure. But
And again, I'm not saying that's right, but again, that's a great idea for a movie. Like that kid wrestling with the legacy of his father versus this pull towards the artistic and a system coming down on him because that's not what is called for in the culture. That's a really cool idea. And him overcoming that to become a rock star, but then becoming insane. Again, I want to see the version of The Wall that tells this story, but actually tells a story rather than just, again, pretty pictures.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I guess for me, I enjoy the pretty pictures and the ideas that it instilled in me, and the ideas or self-reflection or whatnot that they had in here. But in general, I was just surprised that what the film actually was about. So,
Well, I want to get back to that because you mentioned you start off by saying that this wasn't quite what you'd expected. What I'm curious, based on, I know you didn't know a whole lot about The Wall, but what had you expected this movie to be?
I thought it might have been more of what you were talking about, is a linear narrative of sorts, of presenting this kid in a society that's very strict or whatnot. And then you had the fascism element in here, and then there's rebellion. And I thought there would be a more linear story with this going into it, with the way some of the songs that you listen to play out. And so I guess going into it, that's kind of what I was expecting, a little bit more direct with the commentary, not making it, oh no, this is just internalized PTSD and other things of trauma that this guy has suffered over the years. And also the fact that he's grown to hate his audience so much to where he sees himself as a controlling dictator over his fans, which is what the actual fascism part of it is. And it is him internalizing the fact that, oh, you know what, I'm a dictator, I can tell my fans to do whatever the hell they want and they're going to do it. And some fandom there is out there is like that. I mean, it is, that some stars get so big to where there is that, not as much now, but I know like in the 80s and early 90s, there were some stars that were so big that could say, hey, go over here, go do this. And they're like, okay. I mean, you had that even back with Manson. I'm sorry, he wasn't a rock star, but he was
wanted to be,
someone
and that's the problem.
he wanted to be, yeah. But you know what I mean? So I mean, I thought that was interesting to see what I thought, and I'm sorry, folks, I making sure I construct my thoughts properly here. What I thought the fascism scenes were about and the conformity scenes were about can be like interpreted as that, but within the context of the film, they're actually something different. And I guess that's what I mean by a different expectation from what I thought those scenes were actually about within the context of the film, and then seeing the film and seeing the context of what they're actually being presented as, and they're actually different. I enjoy them, in either interpretation, but that's what surprised me was like, oh, I had a number of those moments when they were playing the especially the longer extended music parts. I was like, that's what that's about.
Well, help me out with it, because I honestly, I didn't fall asleep this time. I made it because I was determined to talk to you about this movie. So I did this for you, Mark. But
I appreciate
I did zone out quite a bit. Like, I was awake, I was watching it, but I was like thinking
you weren't
about other
taking it.
things.
Yeah, you weren't taking in what was actually being said. Yeah. Or done.
Because I didn't know if there was anything being said. I'm
Right,
like, it's
Mhm.
more music. But this idea of him being a dictator and getting the fandom to do whatever he wants, where was that in this movie versus commentary that came afterwards in terms of, Pink Floyd's interpretation of what all this meant? Because if that was what he thought, again, I don't see any evidence to support that his fans did anything crazy except attend his concerts and buy his records and maybe be groupies backstage. But that's just being a rock star.
I guess the way that's how I saw it, as with him taking his turn. I will admit as well that after the movie, my wife looked some things up as well. So it did help. And what I got, what I was interpreting out of it is what it was, is that the fascism imagery later on, my wife told me about, was, I guess, the interviewed Waters or whatnot, is actually detailed of how he envisioned stardom and the star hating the fans and the fandom so much that it was looked upon in the most negative way possible. So I think for me, that's kind of how I interpret it. But again, I didn't get that till I watched the movie. Until I watched the movie, I thought it was something completely different. I thought this was going to be more of a linear narrative and story. So I did not expect. I mean, I figured some, because it's Pink Floyd. Okay, so I figured there'd be some surrealism in here and that, but I thought it would be maybe more along the lines of this is going to be probably a bad analogy, but I thought it was going to be more along the lines of a musical version of Wizards, the animated Bakshi story Wizards.
I don't think I ever saw Wizards. I'm behind on my Bakshi, I'll admit.
Oh, that's right. You weren't on that episode when we covered it here. No, but if you do watch it, that movie, man, Bakshi, man, he can tell an animated tale, let me tell you. But there's some of those themes that I think just touched upon ideas in that in Wizards that are touched upon here. Wizards, I will say, does it in a more coherent, cohesive fashion. This is definitely nebulous. The Wall is definitely open to many things, and I truly think it was made for a more specific audience than they may try to. It surprises me that the film like this was widely released because of the specificity of not only it being Pink Floyd. So if you're not into Floyd, you may not be going to it, and then the type of movie it is. So it's interesting that they even chose to release this world, on a wide release to theaters. This has felt more like festival and art house fodder of sorts.
Yeah, and I think I've been kind of dumping on the movie for almost an hour now, but I do want to underscore, like, I do appreciate what Alan Parker did, as the director of the movie. I mean, I try and put myself back into 1982 and seeing this on a big screen, this kind of musical experience, and seeing what they did, because the animation really is spectacular
It's
during that
amazing.
handful
Yeah.
of scenes. Not only the quality of it, but what they do of things morphing into each other. There's flowers turning into beasts and copulating, and the airplane and the birds that I mentioned, the cross imagery. I love seeing the British flag kind of like disintegrating and turning into the bleeding cross.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really cool looking. I don't know what half of it means, and I'm
Mhm.
not convinced that the filmmakers did either, but it's still cool to look at. I don't feel like the substance of the story is worth all the effort that went into telling it, and that's where my frustration comes in. But it's a hell of a movie to experience
Mhm.
for 30 minutes. Sorry.
Well,
Oh.
or having help with some mind altering
Oh
substances,
yeah, then
maybe.
put it on repeat for like 6 hours, man. Go for it.
Oh man, if I'm tripping shit, I'm tripping ball. I'm watching the wall, man. I'm staying in my chair and I'm just gonna trip on this for a while.
Dark side of the shrooms, am I right?
Dark side of the shrooms. And we have had scrolling on the screen here. We've got Co Clegg here. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got some comments here. It said that the movie had a couple of tracks from the final cut. It did have a couple tracks included. I was looking up trivia on that actually. That they did include a couple of tracks here on the final cut. Not my show, their album. And then get out with your work, instead of writing that poetry. And he also says, I got the strap in the mid 80s from the principal in grade 2 Canada. Yeah. Then the 80s it still carried through for sure. And then Cole Clegg says, I think the wall has more of a side effect of Waters having a meltdown over the way Rick Wright outshined them all on Wish You Were Here and Animals. That could be it. I mean, it's talked about that the film is from various experiences of meltdowns and other things that they've had, that not just Waters, but other rock stars have had, not only the Pink Floyd, but just in general. So again, this is where I think some of the meaning may be lost on if you're not in, so to speak, the crowd or in the know. And that's why it's surprising that this was a theatrical versus festival release, because I could see this being played at like say a rock movie festival or something, to where it's a where the festival where they have rock stars as well as movies playing, and so they play this and the rock stars who are performing end up coming in and watching the movie and going, dude, you know what I mean? It's, I think part of the loss in meaning and such that you're getting, Ian, is, and where I could be completely off in my take as well, is just the fact we aren't rock stars by any means.
Speak for yourself, sir. Come on.
Okay, you're a rock star. You're a podcast star.
I had to clear like inches, layers of bras and panties off my camera just to be able to see you tonight, sir.
It is laundry day. What?
Yeah.
Your turn to do the laundry.
It's always my turn to do the laundry.
It's always your turn to do.
I'm a kept man, sir.
Yes, very domesticated like myself. But I one of the things that I thought was interesting too is where he trashes his room, which was definitely in the 80s, the stories we always get, because you didn't have the interwebs. You didn't have a phone catching this all the time. So you'd get these stories in like rock magazines and such, to where they say, Bon Jovi trashed their room, and you're like, what? Why would you? And then you see the Pink Floyd, The Wall, and you go, oh, maybe they had a meltdown or a disagreement, and this is how they express themselves. And I do think you hit on something there, Ethan, and we get that Ian, sorry, the imagery here with the kid and himself looking at himself as in present day, so to speak, is the stunted growth of his personality or his approach or how he handles things, how Pink hasn't really dealt with things in the best manner, and he hasn't exactly had the guidance to handle things in the best manner. I mean, even when we see the wedding footage that he has, it's he's almost reluctant to get married, like he's just going through the motions. Like this isn't what he really wants to do, and even later on when he goes on trial, so to speak, and he's in the bathroom and he's back and he's revisiting that old poetry book that he had, almost implying that the original creative he was when he was 11 years old, he wants that again because he feels like he doesn't even have that by revisiting his book. And then but that's just a small scene. I mean, you're right. I mean, there's great ideas in here that I can see would make a great long narrative just from those concepts in here. And so I think we will wrap it up here. I for my final thought with Pink Floyd The Wall is an experience. If you're into some wild visuals and some fantastic hand-drawn animation, I the animation in here, I watched it and I'm like, okay, I heard stories and I've seen clips, but wow, what they did, especially when you consider it was made in 82, mad props to the artists who put that together, because that was very imaginative, very effective. The planes turning into white crosses. I'm like, wow. And like, that's great. It's just, you don't have the word or the structured narrative to back up, okay, how's that impacting necessarily some of the characters in that. But for me, it's a piece of art similar to going into an art museum, and for some you can look at the painting and go away, and for those who like to stand and stare at the painting for quite a long time and look at the layers, and while they're looking at the layers in the painting, thinking back in the layers of their own mind, going in both those ways. Wow, I'm getting deep tonight. This may be, you may get more out of it, but yeah, I mean, it's not going to be for everyone, but I'm very happy I watched it. I enjoyed a lot of things about it. I didn't quite care for the ending. I will say, while the ending, I understand within the rest of the film, the ending is it ends naturally the way the rest of the film is. I would have liked to get a little bit more of a punch of an ending than what we get here. So yeah, for me, I enjoyed it, and I'm glad I watched it. But Ian, I know your final thought, but please give a final thought of you as you say, you've bashed it overall, but it sounds like there's at least some positives you have in here.
You don't know my final thought, because I'm
Okay.
going to recommend that people watch The Wall. There you go.
Okay.
And I would recommend, well, okay, so 82, the next anniversary is going to be a couple years away at least, and it'll be an odd one.
Yeah.
But I'd say go see it at a theater. They have like some kind of a big
Oh,
revival.
yeah.
Because I mean, we've touched on the animation and Gerald Scarfe's design. I mean, I've liked him since I discovered him, a few years ago, because I'm a big Ralph Steadman fan. He's the guy who did the illustrations for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and
Sure,
had
yeah.
a lifelong partnership with Hunter Thompson. And Scarfe is kind of that school, or Steadman is of the Scarfe school. I don't know who came first. I haven't gone that deep.
it's yeah, you're especially with artists, it's always hard to tell who influenced who where.
Right. But I love his artwork, and the aesthetic of The Wall really can't be beat. It's very well produced and realized and shot. As I mentioned, Alan Parker knocks it out of the park. But I recommend it for the visuals, but also to just determine, especially if you've made it all the way through this conversation, see how you feel about the story, the narrative, the themes, does it carry through, or would it have benefited from an actual screenplay? Because I'm very happy to be turned around on this, but after several decades and
Sure.
numerous attempts, I still and finally having made it through, I still can't quite see it. But I recommend it's The Wall. It's iconic, right? Even if you've just seen the imagery or the logo plastered on t-shirts and you wonder what that's about, I think you owe it to yourself to figure out what it's about and figure out if it's about anything. And if it speaks to you, that's awesome. But yeah, it just didn't speak to me, even though it sang a lot.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I am sorry I assumed your final thought on this. Thank
No,
you.
you
But
were right to assume, because 99% of the time you're right.
well, well, except when it comes to my wife, then I'm always wrong and she's always right, and that makes a happy life. But
That's why we're always on laundry duty, Mark.
that's why we're always on laundry duty. But yeah, it's one of those films you should see once. I mean, you hear about it, you see clips, but you really should experience at least once. And yeah, in a couple of years, it should get the would it be the 20? It'd be so 82. Yeah. So in 2 years, it would be a 45-year anniversary. So
Something like that, if
yeah, I
that's right.
think math. I didn't get my hand slapped enough, I guess, in math class. But I think it'd be like a 45-year anniversary. If they do a wall showing in that, I might go see it in the theater, because I imagine, as far as a theatrical experience with the audio and the music, that's got to be wild to experience. Even even if you're not a fan, or if you're looking for a narrative, just sensory wise, that's got to be wild to
Well, speaking
experience.
of that, and I know we are wrapping up, but I just want
No.
to bring this up. Like,
Mhm.
I we keep harping on how great the animation is, but we're still not doing it justice. There are transitions and transformations in here that you'd think were done by CGI.
Mhm.
They are so smooth and complicated, but then you realize, no, this is all painted cell animation.
Yeah, because
And
it's
you just
filmed
wonder
too.
how.
It's filmed too. So we're talking cell animation here. We're not even talking about like keyframes and shit like that. We're talking about hand it's
Yeah,
like,
it's
yeah,
amazing.
it
Yeah.
it it is amazing. And for me too, what stood out was the camera work done by Peter Bijou, or I'm sure I mispronounced that, but who's done a lot of films that you might be familiar with. Did 9.5 Weeks, World Apart, Mississippi Burning, In the Name of the Father, The Truman Show. Yeah, so no slouch there in talent and cinematography too. We got a couple more comments. We'll wrap up. Cole Clegg says, you must see Dark Side of the Moon synced with The Wizard of Oz. Yes, you must. And they do agree the end of The Wall was weak. And that's, I could definitely agree upon, is that I wanted, with everything going on, I wanted more of a, give me that ending. Okay, we've gone this journey. Give me this ending with this character. And you still even get a kind of a type of ending with your character at the end. And I think that for me was really the disappointing part with that. But thank you so much, folks, for listening to me try to be coherent in my descriptions of stuff, and Ian being very coherent in his, as he always is. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody tuning in, especially Coke Leg. Thank you so much for the wonderful comments tonight. And as always, now this is where I give my crew members the license to shill. So, Ian, please shill away.
I'm Ian Simmons. I run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also on YouTube under Kicking the Seat. Do live streams and interviews and movie reviews. And this coming Thursday at 8 p.m. Central Time, we'll be doing a live stream about the Yorgos Lanthimos film Begonia. Usually we do these things on Wednesdays, but I've got obligations on Wednesday. I've got a life, Mark. For the first time in a long time, I'm actually doing stuff. So
That's
yeah, I'll be
awesome.
doing that on Thursday, the live stream rather. So yeah, thank you. And I'll also here on Sunday nights, let me try that again, with Mark talking about movies. And as always, regardless of what I feel about the film, the discussion is always, worth the effort.
Which means a lot to me, because me being coherent in conversations is always a challenge. So, and it stands for Corporal Clegg, who has a wooden leg. They won it in the war in 1944. Nice, nice. And with that, we will close it out. Next week will be our penultimate Over the Hill episode, where we're going to talk about The Who's Tommy. So we're going from one wild ride to another. Yes, rock and world, baby. That's what you get with these rock musicals. We'll see how that lands with our crew. Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Please check out a couple of interviews I have that just dropped on YouTube with a couple of wonderfully talented individuals. They've got a new film coming out called Yesterday is Almost Here. And it was great talking to them both. I've followed their works. In fact, one was the star in All Jacked Up and Full of Worms, another wild film. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. So check those out and much more coming up. So stay tuned. And until next time, folks, we'll just say a good night, everyone.